Hello and welcome everyone to the Q&A sessions with Meeta and Tosh. Hi, Tosh.
Morning, Meeta. I'm surprised to see you and pleasantly surprised to see you. For those that don't know, Meeta had a really bad week. You had the jab this week, didn't you?
Yeah, I had my second Pfizer jab, and apparently the second Pfizer jab can knock you off your feet. So I'm still, just for effect, I'm still a bit horsey and I've got a cough, so forgive me.
Yeah. Have a nice glass of water ready, and but I'm glad you're feeling much better now.
Thank you.
Lots of other people, some people obviously had nothing, and others I've seen it's like it's one or the other. I've not had anybody in the middle.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. Employers are really relaxed about giving people the room to get over the jab. It's funny, usually if someone called in sick, there would be a, why are you sick, blah, blah, blah. But people are sort of saying, well, listen, it's a couple of days. And again, that trust and confidence and understanding between employers and employees has really grown. So it's interesting times, which is why we're doing today's topic.
That, and also because one of our participators that tunes into the webinar asked for this topic. It was something that was a kind of a debate they were having, and I think it's a good one. I quite like not talking about vanilla topics that are just tree huggy. They need to be quite practical for people. And we've got some tips and we've got some suggestions, like we always do, to talk about the responsibility for happiness and well-being in the workplace. And wasn't it Mental Health Week last week or something like that?
This is Mental Health Week, yeah.
So, it's all part and parcel of the same sort of thing. So we're going to talk about practical ways of dealing with it, legal ways of dealing with it, and just maybe different ways that we can just overcome those sorts of challenges you might be having at work, right? Or with your people.
Well, I think it's, there's a lot of pressure at the moment on organizations. They have been remote. We've been running training sessions on remote working, which is now going to become hybrid working. Everyone's fatigued. We were talking about this just before we went live. Everyone is fatigued. Employers, employees, HR in the middle of all this are sort of being pushed and pulled every way. And, there's become, and I think what our attendee said is that it feels like there's these new bragging rights. Well, my company did this, and this is the way I was treated. And people are talking with their feet. If their employer didn't treat them well and keep them happy, people are leaving. So all the knowledge, all the expertise, that's gone out of your organization. What's replaced is hiring costs, time taken to look for people, and it's tough out there at the moment. So what we're talking about today, and I'm just going to read it out, and we're doing this for about 30 to 40 minutes today, is whose responsibility is it to keep happiness and well-being the priority at work? And I tell you what, interesting results, because when we did the poll last week in the room, the majority said the CEOs of an organization, the leadership. But I actually put this out to LinkedIn, and it was obviously a bigger demographic, a broader slice of the demographic, and a third said employees are responsible. A third said CEOs and founders. A third said management. No, it wasn't a third. It was 35% CEO founder, 27% management, 33% employees, and only 5% said HR, which I think we all agree that strategic HR is very much pushing the people plan into an organization and then feeding back to the board, essentially, how people are doing in the overall strategy. But it doesn't sit with them, does it? So Tosh and I are going to do a bit of a debate scenario today, as opposed to, a kind of information sharing approach, right?
It's an info debate. Let's call it that.
An infobate. Now that sounds good. Info debate. Right. So moving on, I'm just going to quickly do a bit of housekeeping, which is that we have a chat box to the right and we have a poll, as always, and we want your thoughts on culture. Again, it's a word that's used everywhere. Culture, the answer to everything. But do you think culture is everything it's cracked up to be? So the options are yes, no, and other. If it's an other, then put what you think in the chat box. So the chat box is there to make this a session that's really useful to you. Tosh and I say we're here to give you solutions. We come up with lots of ideas. We glean these from conversations we have. Tosh, you and I talking to different clients, different organizations, employers, employees, we get a real landscape, don't we, of what the temperature of the room is.
Yeah, and what challenges people are going through, how to overcome those challenges. That's daily. We are in the solutions business, so that's what these webinars are about. These live business Q&A sessions. I want you to look at it like an open surgery. So anybody, don't worry about what the topic is today. Obviously, the topic is the topic for however that comes about. But if you've got any challenging situations that's relevant to what we're talking about, put it in the chat. We're going to be going through that all the way through. The routine if you've been here before. We promise to answer every single question you put in the chat. This will last about 30 minutes long, this webinar. Maybe sometimes we go a little bit over to the 35, 40 minutes tops. And if you don't want to talk about it here, or you don't want to put a question, then take it offline. Give us a ring. Our contact details you will know what they are if you've registered for this. And it will be us that picks up the phone. We will talk to you directly. And also check us out on LinkedIn, connect with us. Meeta and I put so many things out there. We run separate businesses. We've got the main group, talent management. We've got astute law, employment law services. We provide, as a combination of the two services, there's so much stuff that goes out there. Yeah. Connect with us on LinkedIn as well. It's value. And guess what? It's for free. So use it. And the main thing I always say is we're not just telling you what the law is or whatever different bits and pieces are. We're actually giving you practical steps and to deal with real situations, not just some sort of textbook.
Yeah, indeed. And not only running our own world, but so many organizations. And we deal predominantly with the SME market, the sort of 10 to 500, so there's such a range of ways that organizations are overcoming the challenges. And we started it a year ago, didn't we, Tosh? We had our 1-year anniversary about a month ago, and we just want to keep putting good out there. And hopefully this time you dedicate and the time you commit to these 30 minutes will get you answers that you can take back to your world. So I have to say, Tosh, in one way, I don't know where to start with this, because isn't it obvious, employers have to make the environment and employees have to eat, live and breathe it. Surely that's it. Drop them off.
Let me start, right? Let me start where it is. So the first question we've got on our list is, where do the legal and moral boundaries stand with happiness at work? So from a legal point of view, your obligation is to provide a safe place of work and a safe system of work. So, when we were talking about, how people are working from home, you have a conversation with them. It doesn't mean you need to get a detailed assessment carried out. Most people will have a desk. They will be in a safe environment. Most means like 99.9%. They get their laptop, they'll have a phone, and they can work. And you've met their obligation to provide a safe system and a safe place of work. But that isn't necessarily what we're talking about here, are we? We're talking about happiness and well-being. So the legal obligation is that, okay? In terms of the morality or keeping them happy, why is that a factor? Well, it has to do with a sense of fulfillment, a sense of purpose, a sense of wanting to be at work, not just clocking in, clocking out, although the majority of people don't have that, in fact.
Yeah. So I am actually very much about, if an organization creates, the rules of engagement, essentially, a culture is an agreement. And actually, Helen, thanks for your comment. Helen says culture is best when created by everyone. It is really effective when people try to deliver it. I agree with that. But I also believe that it's an organization's responsibility to say, look, culture's key. It's what binds us. It's what keeps us all facing in the same direction. What do we stand for? I've got a couple of really good culture exercises. And if that's something of interest, then reach out and I can talk to you about it. But essentially, you break down teams into groups of 5 to 10 in your organization, and everyone asks and answers the question, who do I value and why? And I think I might have mentioned this to you, Tosh. So everyone decides 3 people in the world. It's a bit like the dinner party question. If you had a dinner party, who would you invite? Same sort of thing. Who do I value in my world? Is it a family member? Is it an employee, a colleague, or an old boss? Is it someone in the social world? Is it a politician? Is it a business? Whoever. But it's not just who, but why. And when all those people put their whys together, you create a word cloud. And that word cloud becomes the value system of the organization and becomes the culture. So it's not just employees doing it, it's employers, it's everyone. And actually, if you can do that across the board in your organization, and we run culture days where we work people through the process, and at the end of it, we deliver the culture, that is so powerful, because each and every word in that culture manifesto is for the people, by the people. And then we encourage people to celebrate that culture we do something called Ambassador Awards. And every month, people within teams will nominate each other based on the culture that's been defined by them in that culture day. So I agree, it has to be that the opportunity to create the culture has to be given by the employer, but then the culture manifesto has to be pulled together by everyone.
So I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the question is, the question we're dealing with here is, where do the boundaries stand, as in who's responsible for it? And the way the question was put when you put the questionnaire out was, you gave categories.
Yeah.
Actually, the answer is what Helen has just said. Everyone, and that starts with me. It's responsibility with me to look at happiness at the workplace. That means raising it with your employer if your employer doesn't have that culture. Because remember, everyone doesn't fit with everybody. So the starting point is absolutely right in terms of the company being clear on what they stand for and what they're doing. The next thing is making sure their employees are aligned with that. Well, how do you do that? Well, find out what they want. Have a transparent, really grown-up, nice conversation of what do you want to do here? What do you see as something you're going to contribute? What do you want to achieve in the next 12 months, 5 years, or whatever the plan is? Because if they're not aligned right at the root, well, you can kind of realize that things don't fit for everybody. So in terms of happiness, yes, it's an employer's responsibility to kind of create a way of behaving. This is how we operate here. This is how we think. This is what we believe. But then it's also the employer to make sure that the employee understands that. Because a lot of the time, the employee is just coming into work. I've got maybe bills to pay. I haven't got time for this, the great big dream and all the rest of it. Or they just don't think that way. Maybe they're not wired that way. So it's understanding you've got to get the fit right in the first place and how you get that. Yeah. So everybody's responsible for that in one way or another.
Well, I'm usually the carrot, not the stick. But I actually think that, a harmonious and happy workplace, what about successful? What about the most successful? What about award-winning? What about these words that are going to make this organization stand out shoulders and above the rest? Because people want to be part of something successful. You give somebody the choice of being part of something successful or something failing, obviously they're going to choose something successful. So let's not forget words like, best in class. So yes, the leaders of an organization have to say culture is important. Everyone has to put into that culture. And then it's important for each and every employee to make a commitment to putting that back in. So the stats were actually a third CEO, a third employees, a third management, because it is everyone. The stats online, and even from our survey we did last week. But it's easier said than done, isn't it? Chris, you've made a comment here. Maybe culture is like a cake. All the basic ingredients are there for a great tasting cake. Yeah. The job of leadership is to act as the wooden spoon, ensuring the ingredients are well mixed and cooked to perfection. Absolutely. But everyone chooses the ingredients, but leadership have to align with those as well. So what if you do that exercise with leadership and the employees are completely different? There's a disconnect. Then you think about, well, how did these people get in the door? If this is leadership's culture and vision of the organization, they're hiring the people to deliver that vision in a behavior that they've defined. Well, then where's the disconnect? Why have they brought people in that aren't aligned? So actually, it's the responsibility of the leadership and the senior leadership to create an environment where culture is embedded in everything they do. So starting from, obviously, being the 360 talent consultancy that we are, it starts with how you hire. So do you have a stage in your interview process where you define what somebody stands for, who they are? In your job descriptions, do you have not just competencies, but behaviors? Do this exercise, ask them at interview. We do that. We ask, who do you stand for? Because if you've already done that exercise, you've defined your culture, well, how are you going to make sure it's like Fort Knox to get in your world? Right?
I think there's a couple of things I've got here, and I'm obviously coming from a slightly different perspective. So I've come from a perspective
That's why it's called a debate.
where employers come to me and they don't know how to handle the employee in a certain situation. What you're talking about is a situation where everybody's aligned, and if that's correct, well, we're not.
No. Tosh, they're not necessarily aligned, but there is a defined agreement of what good looks like. Doesn't mean everyone does it all the time, but
my point is that a lot of employers feel disempowered because it's the employee creating some issue or some challenge. Again, these are the situations I have to deal with. And what I've realized is a lot of it comes down to is the mindset of the individuals. The employer's mindset about any given situation and the employee's mindset are worlds apart. And it's often the case that both are thinking about themselves and their needs rather than looking at it from the other person's perspective. If the culture is aligned, you look at it from both of each other's perspectives because you're both looking for the solution. How can I make this work for each other? When you're in the situation, well, actually, I've got these problems and, you're my employer and you should look after me and do all those sorts of things. And the employer is thinking, well, hang on a minute. Yes, that's fine, but I need you to do this. So, if you're going to be a job's worth, that doesn't work. It's those people that kind of are flexible, that think outside in that way, that are looking for either to promote themselves and therefore promote the business and where they're at, that kind of get ahead. So I'm kind of saying that I've noticed that it's a little bit like parenting, I suppose, sometimes without it sounding patronizing. If you're going to indulge your children with anything that they want, guess what? They're going to grow up to be brats. Whereas I'm not saying you've got to be, not nice to them or anything, but it's about being firm, fair, knowing what the boundaries are, and then getting aligned with it. And if the employee is not getting aligned on it, well, their happiness is not my goal. It's great if you have it. It's great if you had like a marriage. It'd be great if everybody was happy, but sometimes they don't work out. And then you've got to also know when it's time to let it go. So that's a slightly different angle that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I agree that there has to be an agreement of our culture, what we stand for, what is expected. As for us as an employer, and what we encourage all of our client world to do is to measure success both on outcomes of the job. So whatever those objectives are, whether it's administrative, whether it's scores out of 10 for customer engagement, whether it's sales, whatever you define as a success in a role has to be equally measured by success in achieving cultural alignment. Because that way, sometimes, there's scenarios where you get the top dog in an organization and they actually, they suck the energy out of a room because they're the top dog, but they trample over everyone. So you've got one great person and 99% just feel disengaged. Now, we talk about happiness and harmony, but actually every employer wants an engaged employee. Now, an engaged employee has the emotional intelligence to understand that sometimes they won't be in the best place, but they're in the right place to get the job done. And that will then fulfill the bigger picture, even if today isn't a happy day. So you spoke about...
Everybody wants that, Meeta, but not everybody's doing what it takes to get that. And that's the difference. What are you going to do to get them engaged?
So your scenario about employees saying to employers, well, I'm not happy. Pull out the culture manifesto, pull out your cultural framework. Look at the words that define you. Remember, if you've created the right landscape where culture and responsibility to fulfilling the culture and therefore the strategic objectives of the organization are clearly defined, then you can make it an objective conversation with that employee. You can say, right, as you know, this isn't about me and this isn't about you. These are the words and the behaviors that define us as an organization. So which area are you feeling isn't being fulfilled? Right?
That works when that's actually being implemented. I get that.
This is what we're talking about.
How many organizations have the policy and it doesn't mean jack because they're not really, they refer to the policy when it suits them because, it's not suiting, they're breaking the rules or whatever. But really, for that kind of conversation, it's kind of so obvious because of the way everybody's behaving already.
But it's not obvious for everyone. This is the thing. People's perception is their reality. And that's what you're saying as well. An employee comes in, they can't see it from the employer's perspective, and an employer can't see it from an employee's perspective. We can only live authentically in our own world. We can be empathetic. We can look from other people's shoes. But if we bring it back to the pandemic, we were talking about future topics. And one of the biggest issues is, in the main, employers want employees back to work as much as possible. In the main, employees want to be back at work, but not that much. I think so far, that's what we're picking up. So there is a disconnect. So what's going to bridge that gap?
I think I know what it is. I'll tell you what I think it is anyway.
Sure.
So for me, I've got two layers as an employer of my own staff, right? Layer number one is I've got a business to run. I've got to find the right people to deliver the service in the way that I really want to deliver that service.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And that's what most organizations do. Let's get the people in, skills and so forth, right?
Yeah.
But the next layer is, let's see if the fit is right, because you want to have the right people you want to work with, right? I've got some various categories, as you know, you help me recruit. And one of the things, very strangely, is I just want to work with really nice people. We deal with difficult situations.
Yeah.
The workplace should be, let's have some nice lawyers working together. People I really would love to work with. That's another layer. Next thing is I really want them to be happy at work. So that means we've got an open forum and dialogue about any issues. What I did with all of my staff is I got their bucket list, Meeta. What's the stuff you want to do before you die? Stuff that really matters to them. And actually, maybe Christmas or birthdays, or maybe for no reason, I might be able to tick off some of those things. No, they're not all big, expensive things. They're just things that people don't make time for. Guess what I can do as an employer? I can probably give more money as a salary, or I can give them more time. Yeah. That's as much as I can do in that sense. And I can also create work that they find interesting, challenging, find out what they want to do more of, those sorts of things. So I think when you're missing those two things and you're just letting people come into work to deliver, and if it doesn't work out, off you go, that is where people are missing out. That is where the happiness and well-being in the organization makes that cake a great tasting cake, as Chris is calling it.
Yeah, but I think there's another layer to this conversation, because actually we're saying whose responsibility is it to keep happiness and well-being a priority? But I think there's actually a question of, we've said here, are we now part of an indulging culture? Everything is leading back to this cake, Chris. It's a great analogy you started. Are we indulging? As you said, I talk about our environment being high challenge and high support. What that means is that we expect a lot from our people, because we have exceptional standards and we want to deliver an exceptional experience to anyone that engages with us. So that's the high challenge. But on the balance of that, we give our people a lot of support. So we train them. We continually add to the vessel of growth and reflection. We have a lot of coaching. We have a lot of time for each other to debrief and to fix the problems that are arising in delivering that high challenge work. But it has to be the balance. So I personally think that the pandemic, like we talked about people fatigued, I think people feel a bit broken inside. Yes, we're grateful. Yes, we're coming out the other end. So many have lost loved ones. I'm sure in everyone's organization, they have people that have lost loved ones. And it's hard to say we're back to normal, because some people's lives aren't back to normal. I think overall, as a society, as a working society, in everyone's little working world, they've got to consider that actually we do have to treat our employees with a little bit of extra TLC at the moment. And that's not about indulging them. That's about acknowledging that these are tough times. We don't change the standard. We don't change the challenge of what the role is, but maybe we up that support a little bit.
I appreciate that. My problem is that seems to be a lot of the time a one-way street.
And that's why you have to have...
What, as business owners, you go through struggles. I go through struggles. The employee is not going to care about my well-being. It just doesn't work that way necessarily.
But if employees understand that it's symbiotic, that if your employer's happy, the employee's happy. If the employer's happy, and it continues.
I don't think employees think that way, generally speaking, Meeta. I've got a different relationship with we're a small team. So we all kind of talk about all sorts of different bits and pieces. So I'm saying in a general sense, from my experience of dealing with various companies and individuals and so forth, the employer has to take steps to care about what's going on with the employees. But when the employers want to do things, so right now, what's a very common topic is a lot of companies are trying to get their staff back to work.
Yeah.
But the people have got comfortable. They don't want to come back to work. We've been working all this way. Just because you can work that way doesn't mean that's the best way. You can drive a car with your feet if you want to. Doesn't mean you're going to do that. So there's something they're missing about why is the employer wanting them to come in? What is the difference? And obviously there is a difference. Being in person, firing ideas with each other when you're in the same room, than speaking like this or remotely or through email. But they're not looking at it from the employer's difficulty point of view. They're looking at it from their own motives.
Well, isn't it about being part of something successful? What I went back to, success and happiness in equal measures. Nobody wants to be part of an organization that's failing. Everybody wants to be part of an organization where they have job security, they get a great set of rewards and benefits, they can have career progression, they have choices, they get really nice, days out, whatever, they're looked after. that has to be a balancing act. They have to put in to get out. And this is where culture and actual communication, for me, any problem that arises, I know it's the communication.
Let me give you an example, Meeta. One thing. I did a webinar this week, in fact.
Yeah.
I do a lunchtime Facebook Live webinar called Lunchtime Law, right? And we do different topics. And because it's Facebook, it's normally towards employees and those sorts of things. But this time I did one for employers.
Yeah.
And I'll say it very quickly because I'm conscious of time. And it was how to fire a nightmare employee. And I got lots of really aggressive comments on there, right? So, and they were like, well, what about the nightmare employer? Oh, it's never a nightmare employee that gets fired. They always get away with it and all this sorts of stuff. And there are all these things that were resisting it. So when I did the webinar, I said, look, I've got quite a few comments about it, but I'm not talking about you unless you're the nightmare employee. This isn't getting out every employee, it's getting rid of a nightmare employee. But so then it was interesting to see the way they were thinking about it, because it's a real us and them sort of, obviously in the culture that these people operate in. But also employees have an entitlement mentality. I have my rights, I have this or whatever else it is. You should do this. The employer has more of I've earned this, or we've got to work for this, or we've got to find the solution for this. So that when you're coming from those two different sides, it's again like the parent and the child. So yes, it's the employer's responsibility to get them happy. It's also our to an extent, but it's also our responsibility to know when enough is enough, is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, and the bit in between is that it's the employer's responsibility to hire the people that can see it from the employer's perspective, commercial, mature, ambitious, hungry, or whatever your organization is about. Those are words that I picked up that align with me. Each and every person on this webinar will have their own set of words, behaviors, values, culture that defines them. So I agree. We have a spectrum, right? Actually, the poll at the moment says 2/3 are yes, 1/3 are no. 2/3 think culture is everything it's cracked up to be. 1/3 is no. If anyone is a no, could you put something in the chat box about why you said no? I'd really be interested, because
that means 3 people have voted, yeah?
We have a scale. You have those organizations, especially you look at the ones with the pool table and the grass and all of that, who are all about culture, right? And they bring in young people who, and I think this is where the not-for-profit sector do it really well, because their vision, their why is on the door, right? It's in the title, it's everything. Yeah. Whereas you've got the commercial world where they might be selling really boring products, but actually, as an organization, they can stand for more. They can have a really strong corporate social responsibility. They can commit to bigger things. They can talk about how their product impacts the world. Even if it's the most basic product, they might make it a net carbon product. They might make it a product that, has all different benefits to society. It's how you package what you do. But you're going to get organizations on the scale of that. So what I'm talking about is the fact that if we're talking about happiness and well-being at work, and we're making that a priority, it's to ensure that you've got engaged people that deliver success and your organization is more successful.
Yeah.
Just get on the culture train. Whether you go one stop or you go all the way to the end of the line, move along. That's what I think. That's what I think is important, because somebody told me a statistic. I did a talk about burnout and how everyone's feeling burnt out, and we were talking about reflection. And apparently 15 minutes of journaling improves your productivity by 20%. Well, I can tell you now, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You get a team that are culturally aligned. It's like the rowing boat. You get people rowing in different directions. They're going in circles. You get everyone on the same page, rowing in the same direction. You're winning that boat race. So just get on, whatever stage you're at, just move yourself forward.
And the only way you get that is by frequent, open communications, behaviors consistent with what you're saying. All those sorts of things that really show that it's real, it's authentic, and you don't. It's not up here. You really feel it. That sense of purpose. You get up for what? For a job, or you're getting up to do something.
Yeah.
Make a difference in some way, or what have you. Again, your attitude to it will change everything in terms of that sense of fulfillment and happiness and well-being, effectively. But in answer to the question, Meeta, so whose responsibility is it? Let's give them a summary. Whose responsibility do you think it is?
I feel like I'm on the witness stand and you answer a yes and no question when it's not that simple.
Yeah, sure.
I would say that without the employer facilitating the environment for a culture, there's not going to be a happy and harmonious workplace. So what I would say is it's everyone's responsibility to stay on that path. But I think it starts with an employer who believes in having an environment of harmony and happiness for engagement and productivity.
And contrary to where the discussion is going, I totally agree.
Well, I'm glad, because we are.
It's got to be right, hasn't it? A lot of it is common sense, not getting lost in the detail and that sort of thing. I think we've got a few more questions. Let's go through those, Meeta, because I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, no, let's do that. And thank you, everyone,
for
your comments. So Helen says, I think there is a foundation layer before corporate business culture. It's about connecting with and understanding other humans. If you don't have that, corporate culture becomes ineffective. 100%.
Yeah, exactly right. We'll get a policy, chuck it in the drawer, never look at it again, is what that is.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that if you are going to have culture, it's more damaging to do all of that work and then not address it, because actually people then think that you're not an authentic employer.
Yes.
They pay a lot of lip service, but it's not what you stand for, and they will mistrust you. So if you're doing it, do it only as much as you say you're going to do it. Don't promise the earth and then not deliver. But try and find what you can do, even if it's once a year. You do that culture exercise, and then you have those words on walls, you have it in your appraisals, and you have it in your interview stage. That is a really good starting point. We have cornerstones of culture: greatness, integrity, clarity, and energy. And that's it. We measure and we praise and we award around those 4 words. And then we do a once a year refresh.
And it is important to write it down. If you don't write it down, you don't own it. And also there's a different process you go through when you're really articulating what, these are the rules. This is what we feel. This is what we're trying to do. So it's important to do that.
Because if you get it right, it's for the people, by the people. CEOs don't have to do anything. Management doesn't have to do anything. And actually, employees don't feel like they're doing anything. It's authentic.
Yeah.
We are who we are. But we're going to close with a no. So Chris says, I was a no. I love the idea of a positive work culture, whatever that means for an organization. But that is a little one-size-fits-all and doesn't fully consider the variety of cultures in different teams. I think also too many organizations spend time thinking up nice words to define culture, which are more aspirational than realistic.
Yeah, that's tree hugging.
I like that. I agree, Chris. That's why I think it needs to come from the grassroots. It needs to come from the people. And again, I think you're right. Different parts of organizations have different remits and different requirements, but you can have an underlying agreement of what good looks like for your world. As I said, our greatness, integrity, culture, clarity, energy, greatness, and why have I forgotten my 4 words?
You need to look back at your policy.
Anyway,
it's because we're recovering. All right, let's just go with that.
I just said it.
What was it again?
I can't remember. Integrity, clarity, and energy. Yes. Okay. Integrity, clarity, and energy. Chris, those words can be demonstrated in different ways. So rather than, Tosh, you said you want a nice environment and a happy environment. What does that look like? That's what we need to do, is get under the skin of what greatness is. So Chris, in your world, you're saying you're a no, but actually if you said to someone, one of the words we stand for is greatness, how does greatness represent itself in your team, and how does greatness represent itself in another team? Everyone will aspire to greatness. I'm using that as an example in different ways. So don't be afraid to find out who the people in your organization value and why. Bring those words together, create that culture, create the cornerstones, or have 5 words, whatever is important, and start to see how that gets everyone on the same page a little bit more. And we can run that session for you. And I've actually got some training, some masterclass training sessions, which I can make available to you free of charge. So if you're interested, let me know. Tosh, we've got
another one. We've got Philippa there.
Yeah. So Philippa says, I'm interested in the refresh, because a lot of the time I've seen the culture push for a year or so. People then move on and then it tails off. Yeah, absolutely. I can help you with that, Philippa. I'll get in touch and we can talk about that, because it really does have to be something that is, it's a bit like, and I'm going back to basic things, but like the staff handbook, like policies. Every year you do a little overview of, right, here's last year's staff handbook. These are the policies. A couple of things have changed. Everyone have a look. Make sure you're happy with it. Let's move on. Culture's much more fun than that. You can do it over breakfast. You can do it over pizza and bubbles. And you can say, right, let's get a whiteboard and spend a couple of hours. So it's really easy to do. And I think people really appreciate it when you take the time to listen.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
Well, let's not indulge, but let's hold each other accountable to a successful and happy workplace. It's going to be an interesting time coming out of this lockdown into hybrid working. So if we want to retain the best people in our world, we've got to have some conscious engagement to get the right outcomes. That was fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you, Chris, by the way, who's the one that came up with that topic for today. Next week, at the same time, Thursday, 11 o'clock, we're going to talk about how to handle employee complaints, or how to handle any challenges that they bring up. What's the best way? Is it grievances? Is it practical, informal processes? Are there other ways of doing it?
Yeah. Oh, I think we might have lost Tosh right at the end. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to get to. Oh, you're back. Hello. You froze for a minute.
Oh, okay. Now, I was just saying that obviously we're going to be dealing with how to handle employee complaints or challenges in the workplace, and you're going to get a combination of legal and business practical tips on how we dealt with those situations in the past.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone, for your input, and have a great week. We'll see you next Thursday at 11. Thanks, as always.
Bye, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.